Hi, I'm Emily. We all know that libraries are important for lots and lots of reasons, but for me, it's all about the books. So I'm here to share some of my favorites with you today. One of the things that I really love about the library's collection is we have so many different titles that you can learn about history and explore history in unexpected ways. So I picked 4 historical fiction novels that I think will introduce readers to times and places that they might not have learned about otherwise. My first pick is Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. This is a coming-of-age story that's set in Nigeria during and after the Nigerian Civil War, so that's the late 1960s, the 70s, and the 80s. It's about a young woman named Ijeoma, and after her father dies, she's sent to live with another Igbo family, which is the tribal group that she's from. This family also has a house girl who's from a different tribal group named Amina, and these 2 girls are living together, they're sharing a room, and they develop a really close friendship, and then eventually they fall in love. Well, Nigeria in the late 60s is not a time or place that's friendly to same-sex relationships. And so the girls are caught together, they're immediately separated, Ijeoma is sent back to her family, and the book follows her from there as she goes to school, as she falls in love again, and she tries to figure out how to live a life that is authentic and yet recognizes the fact that Nigeria is not a safe place to be in love with another woman. It's a wonderfully detailed portrait of life in a time and place that's unfamiliar to most Americans, and it's a wonderful book. So again, that's Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. My next pick is Darktown by Thomas Mullen. So race in America is a complicated subject and something that we do know a little bit about. Of course, we learn about civil rights in school, but this is a mystery novel that complicates that story a little bit. So this is set in Atlanta in the late 1940s, so after the end of World War II. And it's about 2 of the city's first black police officers. So based on real history, the city of Atlanta did start hiring black men as police officers in the late 40s. And Thomas Mullen uses this piece of history to build a really exciting and compelling mystery. These 2 young men are caught in a funny place. They don't have the full rights of regular police officers. They're not allowed to drive a patrol car. The police force is segregated just like the rest of society, so they have their own sort of crummy office. But they're also seen in their own community as sort of traitors because they're working with the white police force. They're only allowed to patrol the black neighborhoods. They have a really restricted role. And they're out patrolling the black neighborhoods one night when they see this fancy car with a white man driving and a young black woman in the front seat. And they kind of have a run-in with the car and then it drives off. And a few nights later, the woman is found dead. And so they're trying to figure out who she is, how she ended up in the front seat of this car, and then what happened between that moment and the moment that she was found. Again, Mullen uses this historical time, the racial tensions, the sort of complicated structures, social structures on both sides of Atlanta to create a really compelling noir story. It's got all kinds of twists and turns, and again, that's Darktown by Thomas Mullen. So my next pick is a piece of history that Seattleites might actually remember from when it happened. The novel is called Your Heart is a Muscle the Size of a Fist. It's by Sunil Yapa, and it's set during the 1999 WTO protests that happened in downtown Seattle. The novel follows 7 characters who are involved in the protests in a bunch of different ways over the course of a single day. So you have a couple of protesters, a couple of police officers, the fictionalized chief of police, a delegate who's coming from Sri Lanka trying to get to a meeting with President Clinton that's really vital for his country's economic survival, and a young man who's at the heart of the story, who's a runaway, who's grown up in Seattle, has come back, and is basically trying to sell enough drugs so that he can buy a bus ticket to get out of town. And over the course of a single day, Yapa follows these 7 characters as their lives weave in and out as they run into each other in unexpected and really moving ways. So again, that's Your Heart is a Muscle the Size of a Fist by Sunil Yapa. So my last pick is Pachinko by Jin Lee. This is a sweeping multi-generational saga that introduces readers to Korea and Japan in the 20th century. It's a part of history that Americans don't learn a lot about in school, with the exception of maybe a couple of sentences on Japan's role in World War II. So this story follows a family over 100 years, and at the heart of it is a young woman named Sunja. She's a unwed pregnant teenager when the story opens, and she's basically saved from the isolation and shame that come with that by a young minister who's traveling through her town and agrees to marry her. Together they move to Japan, where they move in with his family and raise their children. And the reader gets to follow that family over the course of many years and many historical events. It's a huge cast, it's a sweeping period of time, and the author manages to make all of that feel relatable and interesting by distilling the characters and the moments into these really vivid character interactions. So these characters feel like real people that you know, and you're rooting for them the whole time. It's a story that has a lot of heartbreak in it. It's not an easy time period, especially for Koreans in Japan. They faced a lot of discrimination, they faced a lot of oppression, but it's also full of wonderful moments of joy. So it's a lovely story, beautifully written, accessible, and an interesting part of history that most Americans may not know anything about. Again, that's Pachinko by Jin Lee. Again, I'm Emily. Thanks for joining me for a couple of my favorite picks. To find more great reads, go to kcls.org/books or follow us on social media. We're at KCLS on Twitter, at King County Library on Instagram, and at King County Library System on Facebook.